I still remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong with the way I thought. It wasn't after losing my job. It wasn't when my business failed. It was when I caught myself rehearsing failure, before anything had even happened. That scared me more than the failure itself. For most of my 20s, I believed I was realistic. That's what I called it, anyway. I worked at a small marketing company outside Chicago. Nothing glamorous. Most days looked the same: coffee from the gas station near the office, emails piling up before 9 a.m., meetings where nobody really listened but everyone nodded like they did. I wasn't unhappy exactly. Just tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. I used to think successful people had something I didn't. Better timing. Better confidence. Better connections. Whenever someone around me succeeded, I'd quietly study them and think, of course it worked for them. Never for me. I didn't say those thoughts out loud. But they were always there in the background, shaping everything. At work, I'd hesitate before speaking in meetings because I assumed my ideas probably weren't good enough. In relationships, I'd overanalyze simple conversations until I convinced myself people were losing interest. Even ordering food sometimes felt weirdly stressful because I worried about sounding awkward. The strange part was how normal all of this felt. I thought everybody lived like that. Then came the presentation. Our company had a chance to land a major client. My manager asked me to pitch one section because I had worked on the research. I spent days preparing for it. But the entire time, another voice kept running underneath my thoughts. You're going to mess this up. I remember standing in my apartment the night before, practicing alone in front of my kitchen counter. Every small mistake felt like proof I wasn't ready. Wrong word? Proof. Long pause? Proof. Slight stutter? More proof. By the time presentation day arrived, I already felt defeated. And somehow, exactly what I feared happened. Halfway through speaking, I lost my train of thought. It only lasted maybe 3 seconds, but to me it felt endless. I saw one client glance at another. Someone checked their phone. My chest tightened. The rest of the presentation became a blur. Afterward, my manager tried to be supportive. Honestly, it wasn't that bad. But I could hear the hidden disappointment in his voice. Or maybe I imagined it. I couldn't tell anymore. A week later, we lost the client. I blamed myself immediately. That night, I walked around my neighborhood for almost an hour replaying everything in my head. Every pause. Every word. Every facial expression. I remember thinking something that felt painfully true at the time. Maybe some people just aren't built for success. A few days later, something small happened that I still think about. I was eating lunch alone in the office break room when an older coworker named Daniel sat across from me. Quiet guy. Mid-50s. People liked him, but nobody knew much about him. He looked at me for a second and asked, "You still replaying that presentation?" I laughed awkwardly. Was it that obvious? He shrugged. Only to people who do the same thing. That caught my attention. Daniel wasn't the type to talk much, but that day he stayed. He told me he used to freeze during presentations too. Said he nearly got fired years ago because of it. I honestly didn't believe him. He seemed calm all the time. The kind of person who never looked nervous. Then he said something strange. "You know your problem isn't failure, right?" I remember staring at him, confused. "Then what is it?" He took a sip of coffee before answering. "You treat thoughts like predictions." I didn't fully understand what he meant. But for some reason, the sentence stayed with me all day. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. You treat thoughts like predictions. The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became. Because he was right. Every negative thought I had automatically became reality in my mind before reality even happened. If I thought a conversation would go badly, I entered it nervous. If I thought people wouldn't like me, I became withdrawn. If I thought I'd fail, my body reacted like failure had already happened. I had spent years assuming my thoughts were accurate. I never questioned them. The next morning, I asked Daniel what he meant. He smiled slightly, almost like he knew I'd come back. Then he showed me something incredibly simple. He said whenever he felt anxious or defeated, he wrote down 3 things. What happened? What he assumed it meant. What else could be true? That was it. Honestly, I thought it sounded too simple to matter. But I tried it anyway. The first time was after an awkward conversation with my manager. What happened? He gave short answers during our meeting. What I assumed it meant, he's disappointed in me. What else could be true? He's busy. Distracted. Tired. Thinking about something unrelated. I remember staring at the page for a long time. Because for the first time, I realized how quickly my mind jumped to negative conclusions without evidence. And once I noticed it, I saw it everywhere. A friend taking longer to text back. Someone sounding slightly serious. A stranger not smiling. My brain instantly created stories around everything. Most of those stories made me smaller. That realization changed something. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But slowly. I started catching myself before spiraling. At first, it felt unnatural. Almost fake. Like I was forcing optimism. But Daniel explained it differently. This isn't about positive thinking, he told me. It's about accurate thinking. That sentence hit me harder than anything motivational ever had. Because I wasn't realistic at all. I was biased toward failure. And once I saw that bias, I couldn't unsee it. Over the next few months, I started experimenting with something I quietly called the pause. Whenever I felt embarrassment, fear, rejection, or self-doubt, I forced myself to pause before assigning meaning to it. Not reacting instantly felt uncomfortable. My mind hated uncertainty. It wanted immediate conclusions. But the pause created space between experience and interpretation. And inside that space, things began changing. At work, I started speaking more during meetings. Not because I suddenly became confident, but because I stopped assuming every imperfect moment meant disaster. Sometimes people liked my ideas. Sometimes they didn't. But neither outcome destroyed me. That was new. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, my manager asked me to help lead another client presentation. The old version of me would have panicked for days. And honestly, part of me still did. The fear didn't magically disappear. But this time, I noticed something important. The fear itself wasn't the problem. The meaning I attached to fear was. Before, nervousness meant, you're not capable. Now it simply meant, this matters to you. That shift changed the entire experience. During the presentation, I stumbled over a sentence near the beginning. For a split second, I felt that familiar wave of panic rising again. But then something strange happened. I paused. I took a breath. And instead of mentally collapsing, I kept going. Nobody cared about the mistake nearly as much as I did. That realization almost shocked me. For years, I had been living inside a version of reality built mostly from assumptions. Not facts. Assumptions. And those assumptions quietly shaped my behavior until they became self-fulfilling. The presentation went well. We got the client. But weirdly, that wasn't the moment that mattered most to me. The real change happened later that night. I was sitting in my car outside my apartment when I realized I hadn't replayed the presentation obsessively. No mental punishment. No self-interrogation. No searching for hidden signs of failure. Just silence. Peaceful silence. I think that's when I understood the technique Daniel had accidentally taught me. Most people believe success changes your thinking. But sometimes your thinking changes what success even becomes possible. I had spent years trying to control outcomes while completely ignoring perception. Ignoring the stories I automatically told myself. And those stories affected everything: confidence, relationships, decisions, even body language. The mind is strange that way. If you repeatedly tell it the world is rejecting you, eventually it starts filtering reality through rejection. If you repeatedly assume failure, your behavior slowly adapts to protect you from imagined pain. You stop trying fully. You hesitate. You overthink. You pull back before life can disappoint you. Then when things don't work out, the mind says, "See? I was right." That loop is hard to notice while you're living inside it. I think about that a lot now. Especially when I notice people apologizing constantly. Or assuming others secretly dislike them. Or treating one awkward moment like proof they're fundamentally flawed. Because I recognize that mindset immediately. I used to live there. And the hardest part is that it feels logical while it's happening. That's what makes it dangerous. A year after that failed presentation, I got promoted. Not because I became extraordinary overnight. I just stopped mentally defeating myself before life even had a chance to respond. There's a difference. Daniel retired a few months later. Before leaving, he handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside, he had written one sentence. "Your mind listens carefully to the stories you repeat." I still keep that paper in my desk. Not because it magically solved my life. I still overthink sometimes. I still doubt myself. I still catch my brain creating worst-case scenarios out of almost nothing. But now I notice it happening. And noticing changes everything. Because once you realize your thoughts are interpretations, not absolute truths, you begin seeing people differently too. You become more empathetic. You realize everyone is reacting not only to reality, but to the private stories inside their heads. Some people walk into rooms already expecting rejection. Some expect betrayal. Some expect failure. Some expect disappointment. And without realizing it, they shape their entire lives around those expectations. I did. Maybe that's why certain people seem exhausted even when nothing dramatic is happening. Their minds never stop preparing for emotional danger. Sometimes I wonder how many opportunities, relationships, and experiences disappear not because people aren't capable, but because they already decided the ending before the story even began. That thought stays with me. Because the technique that changed my life wasn't confidence. It wasn't motivation. It wasn't success advice. It was learning to question the meaning my mind attached to things. And honestly, I think a lot of us rarely do that. We trust every fearful thought, every assumption, every interpretation, as if the mind is always telling the truth. But what if it isn't? What if some of the limits people live inside were never reality to begin with, just repeated conclusions that slowly became beliefs? Sometimes I still sit quietly in my car after work before going inside. No music. No phone. Just thinking. And every now and then, I catch myself starting to predict failure again. The old habit never fully disappears. But now, before believing the thought, I ask myself one simple question. What else could be true? And strangely enough, that question changed my life.